I'm often criticized for being anti-guard, and I'm not anti-guard. I actually think that a lot of guards, a lot of correctional staff go into the business in order to help people, and a lot of prisoners tell me that there have been guards that really counseled them and were like big brothers to them and big sisters, that kind of thing. Now, they have among the guards a blue code that makes the prisoner's no snitch rule look silly. That is, a guard is much less likely to inform on another guard than is a prisoner to inform on another prisoner, which would be called snitching. Among the guards, that's called the blue code. So let me give you an example. We're in Michigan. It's a huge sexual assault case where the women are the plaintiff, and there's 500 of them. This is the Neal case. It just settled for $100 million last summer, or 2 summers ago. So one of the women got on the stand and told this story. A guard takes her out of her area, down a hallway which is forbidden to prisoners, even with a guard escort, takes her down the hallway, into a closet, and rapes her viciously. On the way down the hall towards the rape, there is a sergeant who is supervising this officer. They're off limits already. He's sitting in an area that's off limits to a prisoner. This guard is walking this woman down this hall. She's terrified, doesn't know what's going to happen, knows that she's going to an off-limit place, so either she's going to get a ticket for being off-limits or something awful is going to happen. The two chat on the way to the rape, and then the guard moves along, takes her into a closet, rapes her, and leaves her there. The woman puts her clothes back on, gets herself together a little bit, and walks back, and the sergeant sitting there says, "Hey, what are you doing here? This is off-limits," and writes her a ticket. That's an incident. All right. Now, the rapist is a rapist. He is a felony criminal. All right. He happens to wear a guard's uniform. What is the sergeant? There's the blue code. This sergeant is not going to report this. This sergeant is basically doing lookout for the rape. And this goes on all the time. So that it's very hard to mount a sexual abuse case. There are sexual abuse incidents going on all the time. Very hard to mount a case because no guards will testify about what happened. PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, requires testimony by guards and requires the administration to require testimony by guards about what they observe. I'm going to mention something in terms of new empirical evidence of the destructiveness of SHU. I'm involved in a lawsuit in California you've got the Rashel case here. We've got the Ashker case in California. It's out of the prison hunger strike in Pelican Bay. It's being brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights. And the premise of the case is this. The Madrid case happened at Pelican Bay, and it happened when the place had been opened a couple of years. And the judge decided he didn't have enough evidence to rule supermax confinement unconstitutional on the face of it. So he ruled that you can't have people with mental illness in supermax. Well, the new case is now those same people, many of them, have been there for over 20 years, right? The place opened in '89. Some of the original people are still there. Now, is there any additional damage after someone is in solitary for 10 or more years? And we chose 10 arbitrarily as the cutoff. And I went up and interviewed a bunch of people, and I did find additional damage. And I'll just tell you the sort of damage. There is a more radical isolation. Self-isolation is a symptom of solitary confinement. The individual is already in solitary confinement, but they tend to withdraw into themselves. And they do that basically to maintain some stability. It's the least bad of awful options. Well, if that goes on for over 10 years, what happens is they stop talking to their neighbor. They stop using language to communicate. They have nobody to communicate. The guard's going to shove a food tray through the hole. They're going to shove it back, and that's about it. They have no one to talk to. They stop using language. They super isolate themselves. And the other thing that goes on at the same time is they cut off their feelings. They become numb. So that if you ask them, what are you feeling? Are you sad about your mother dying while you were in here? I don't know. I no longer know what I'm feeling. So this radical isolation and radical numbness get worse over decades. And I believe that's the additional evidence we're going to take into court on this new case. As I said at the beginning, I think that what goes on in prison is not in a world apart. It's happening in our world. It's a trial balloon for what we're going to stand for in terms of constitutional violations and torture. And Clara's telling me to wrap it up. I believe what we're witnessing is the criminalization of dissent. If you look at what's happening, here's the pattern. The people who would like to destroy the Constitution take a group of people who seem to have no advocates. Those could be terrorists, they could be people with mental illness, sexual offenders, they could be immigrants. They do something to them which violates the Constitution, and they rationalize it based on security or whatever. All right, and we stand for it. It goes on. It's going on in the prison all the time. Supermax is the tip of the iceberg. It's happening in prisons in every way. Then when they get away with it, they spread out the dragnet, and they include more people. So there was a very frightening two-part series in the New York Review of Books a few weeks ago about the New York Police Intelligence Squad. You know, they have intelligence dossiers on about 10,000 people with the help of the FBI. And now, who are they picking up? Is it terrorists who are right off a plane who are about to blow up the trade towers or something? No. What they do is they arrest, based on their intelligence information, they arrest people who are involved in Occupy Wall Street while they're walking towards the demonstration before they've done anything. All right, that's what I mean, that they take the breach in the Constitution and they spread it out. So when we talk about Supermax prisons, the awful things that happen there are happening out in the community. Look at the schools. Look at the barbed wire on the fences of the schools. Look at the armed guards. Look at the metal detectors in the public schools. We're taking the Supermax prison, Angela Davis said this, the Supermax prison is becoming the model of our education system. And so I believe what's happening is a criminalization of dissent. In Pelican Bay, I talked to one man who's been in there for 20-some years. He's not involved in any gang activities. He hasn't done anything wrong. They did a cell search, and a cell search in the California Department of Corrections is pretty thorough. They take pictures and they tear them up. They look through clothes, they take the clothes apart, they rip the seams of the clothes, they find everything. And George Jackson's name was found in his cell. They put him in SHU forever because he's a member of the Black Guerrilla family on the basis of having George Jackson's name. Now, I have George Jackson books in my office library. That is the evidence against him for gang affiliation. And then there are informants who say, yes, he's a gang member and that kind of thing. So what's happening is a prisoner who's bright enough to figure out that George Jackson has something to say and that they want to read his book or something is going to be called a gang member. Well, when you go into these shoes, you find some of the brightest. Again, Bryan and King are examples of this. Some of the brightest, some of the most politically conscious. You find the best jailhouse lawyers. You find Muslims. They systematically go after Muslims. And so what they're doing is criminalizing dissent. And we do have to bear witness. I have my little piece. I'm honored to be able to go to court and expose some of this. What you're doing here is just wonderful in terms of political organizing, and we all need to do more.